Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us Mosso at the1916company.com for all of your purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. Today we're discussing a 2023 launch and just in time. For years, IWC had been focusing on the roots of its Ingenieur model, the 1950s and 60s, but the most recognizable and celebrated iteration was that designed in 1976 by Gérald Genta at the height of his powers. That model, the Ingenieur SL, or reference 1832, informed the design of Ingenieurs through the decades leading up to about 2016, when IWC reverted to the 50s and 60s interpretation of the breed. Well, most folks the last decade or so wanted something like this, and their prayers have been answered. This is now the reference 3289-04 IWC Ingenieur Automatic 40. It is a watch 40 millimeters in diameter in grade 5 titanium that gives you that lovely Genta aesthetic, but it is not the equivalent of something like the Royal Oak Jumbo or the Nautilus 5811, whereas those are very much modern versions of the 70s watch. This is more like something along the lines of a Royal Oak 15510, a modern version, and very forward-looking with refinements that set it apart from something like a core model. This is an evolution of the species, not a throwback watch. So I'll focus on some of the elements like the dial details, the bracelet design, and the crown guards that pull this into the 21st century. But let's talk about the basics. This is grade 5 titanium, and the first thing you can see is that the watch features a unique media blast finish that is not included on the steel versions of the watch. We have a more intricately finished case that is 40 millimeters in diameter, 10.9 millimeters thick, and if you measure the first link to its opposite number, the total distance across the wrist is 49.7 millimeters. And then we pop the bracelet open, we throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and the watch wears well. It's very, very light, almost toy-like, and being so thin with a sloped bezel, it will slide underneath a cuff. Being light and fairly compact, I could recommend it for a 14 centimeter circumference wrist, and this is a genre of watch that tends to wear about a size or two larger than its claimed diameter. I can tell you, with this watch on my wrist right now, it's rated 40 and it wears 40, so one of the few in its space, along with the Laureato, that tends to be true to size in terms of how it fits. 14 centimeters circumference wrist and up. This is 16. That's what you're looking at. So if you look at the original Ingenieur SL, its bracelet is not as intricately finished as this, nor are the links shaped precisely the same way. If you take a close gander, you can see that there's a combination of media blast and polished beveling, and this is much more intricate than what you'll find on the steel version of this model. Also, we have three finishes with polish, longitudinal brushed satination, and then media blast. And so it creates a wonderful three-way contrast while still using the same material. The bracelet, designed by Bracelet out of southern Italian-speaking Switzerland. It's a long-term supplier of IWC bracelets and clasps. This Bracelet design goes all the way back to the GST in IWC service, and you can see every one of these little knobs underneath and the bars in profile that indicates a removable link. You can also see that we have these intermediate sized links built in on either side, so if you find yourself in between sizes, that little intermediate size link that's about 150% the size of the others, that can help you fine-tune the fit. Internally, we have a clasp, and you can see it is Swiss-made and titanium. It features a double folding action and a twin trigger release system. This clasp will be very familiar from many different brands, but its ubiquity is a sign of its solidity and reliability. So with a double fold and a curved chassis, it's nice and easy to put on a smaller wrist, and the curved chassis wraps around the curvature of the bottom of your wrist. You can see that there's a little bit of an engine turning that receives the overlap of the IWC logos. The attention to detail here is quite good. You can also see that the pushers themselves feature both a combination of a matte finish and a polished accent, which is deeply appreciated, as these are often overlooked details. And close it all up. It will not open unless you press both triggers. So this is a proper sports watch clasp. Rolling back to the case, we talked about some elements that are more modern than nostalgic, and the crown guard is probably the most obvious element, as this crown guard design was not a feature of the original Gérald Genta Ingenieur SL. You can see we have here a media blasted crown with the IWC motto Probus Schaffhausen, good solid watches made in Schaffhausen. We have not just those three different finishes, but you can see there's a bevel that runs end to end across both sides of the case. We also have that treatment on the crown guard structures themselves with media blast on top, a transitional bevel that wraps all the way around, and then satin on the outer faces. So the finishing here is outstanding. It's intricate. It looks expensive, and it should, because this watch costs over $14,000 new. Now, some folks have asked, is it worth it? While you ponder that, let me unpack some of the features, and remember that this is a pre-owned watch, so there is some price accommodation there, which improves the value equation, and these have 8-year warranties, which means buying one a single year after the launch of the model is a pretty good way to get some money off, but also get the same degree of quality from a generational product that you can hand down from generation to generation. A year old with this kind of warranty and a few thousand off, that is a winning bid. And the watch does look and feel expensive. Now, it has that feel of every titanium watch being almost toy-like, but if you're familiar with ultra high-end titanium watches from AP, Richard Mille, de Bethune, that sort of titanium watch, then you're going to understand the appeal here, as it's something that pleases in the less is more paradigm. Taking a look at the case, you can see the polish is a feature of grade 5 tie, which is both lighter than steel and more scratch resistant. Polishing grade 5 is a lot easier than grade 2, and that's why grade 5 is used here. The bezel is a distinctive structure, as it is on most of the Gérald Genta 70s era sports watches, and you can see we have the little bolt style pins that are polished, contrast with the media blast. The dial is rhodium plated, and unique to this model, we have the rhodium plated dial, the color matching date disc, and then blackened hands and indices. This is another place where we have nods to history, but it is not a reproduction of the original, which didn't have these pointed indices or hands and actually featured an applied IWC logo up at 12 o'clock. This is a very different watch, even though elements like the texture of the dial do hark back to the Gérald Genta original. So let's do a lume shot so we can take a look at this watch in the dark. It's a sports watch after all, and you can see there is no shortage of lume. Other sporting features and durability factors here include a screw-down crown, 100-meter water resistance. You can see 10 bar on the back. It's also got a feature generally associated with the IWC pilot's watches. If it's in a cabin that explosively decompresses, like an aircraft that loses pressure, it will not discharge its seals or its sapphire. That's probably your last concern under the circumstances, but every little bit counts when you're adding to the features of a watch. Another and perhaps more relevant feature is that this is an Ingenieur, a model designed during the 50s, initially with technicians and engineers in mind, and it has a soft iron cage that helps to channel magnetic field lines around the escapement and the hairspring. So it's paramagnetic rather than resisting magnetism. It grabs the field and channels it around the vulnerable parts. This is a highly anti-magnetic watch. Inside, we have a movement that IWC calls 32111. It's an automatic 5-day with hacking seconds, a quick set date, 5-position high horology style adjustment. It is a 21-jewel movement, and it's also got a magic lever bidirectional rotating pawl-based winding system. So where does this movement come from? Well, it comes from Val-Fleurier, which is sort of like, I guess the way I describe it is, it's like the bullpen for movement design in the Richemont group. It's a design bureau in Fleurier that designs and supplements the manufacture capabilities of Richemont Group brands. So you'll find a similar movement, for example, in some of the Clifton and Riviera models from Baume & Mercier. But the 5-day power reserve and the 5-position adjustment means that feels like the right kind of movement for a watch like this. This watch is going to trade on its history, its style, the quality and detail of the finish, and the legacy of Gérald Genta. So this is a watch that, yes, is about the anti-magnetic 5-day movement, but it's principally about its aesthetics and its heritage, and it definitely succeeds on those counts. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability details.